I've longed for children, but you're the reason we couldn't have them. My husband spat out, hurling those hurtful words at me after 20 years of marriage. In that moment, I realized I couldn't continue with him. His callousness cut deep and his mind was elsewhere, dreaming of a new life without me. It felt as if some divine eye had witnessed his cruelty. My name is Lisa, 45 years old, a secretary at a law firm. Our marriage, nearing 2 decades, had been modest and childless. Despite our shared desire for children, infertility plagued us, primarily my own struggles. I underwent treatments, exhausting myself physically, emotionally, and financially, only to face disappointment. When I turned 40, we conceded defeat. My husband's desire for children persisted, but I couldn't endure the pain and financial strain any longer. We decided to halt treatments and embrace a childless life, opting for luxury trips instead. Yet the pang of regret lingered, especially when confronted with images of children on TV or greeting cards. Even 5 years post-treatments, guilt and remorse gnawed at me. Then, a school reunion beckoned after a decade. My husband encouraged me to take a break, sensing it as a mini vacation. It felt like a temporary escape from the weight of our childless existence. I realized I had scarcely been out alone since our wedding day, my life consumed by infertility treatments. But a little indulgence now and then couldn't hurt, right? At the venue, catching up with old friends felt refreshing. "Lisa, long time no see. You look great, slimmer than before," one friend remarked. Indeed, I had shed about 22 pounds over the past decade. "Thanks," I replied with a smile. "I envy you. Since marriage and kids, I've gained almost 33 pounds, she lamented. Her words, though innocent, stung a bit. "Any kids for you?" another friend asked. "No, we couldn't," I replied, feeling the weight of the question. "Just the 2 of us." "Oh, sorry for asking such an awkward question," she apologized. "No worries. Let's just enjoy ourselves," I reassured, trying to maintain a lively atmosphere. As conversation flowed, a startling revelation emerged. My son was nearly caught in a marriage scam recently, one classmate shared. I was taken aback. A scam? Yes, they asked him for $20,000 for their wedding, but it fell through, she explained. "What happened next?" I inquired, intrigued. "He couldn't afford it, so he came to us for advice. That's when we uncovered the scam. The woman vanished," she recounted. "It's terrifying," I murmured, shaken by the story. "There are some awful people out there," another friend chimed in. "Really scary." "A marriage scam," I mused, shocked that such deceit could occur so close to home. Thankfully, her son had moved on with a new girlfriend, and the parents seemed relieved. The reunion continued smoothly, eventually winding down. Instead of heading to the after-party, I decided to head home, reflecting on the evening's unexpected revelations. I returned to my hotel, savoring a nightcap alone. It struck me, I hadn't checked in with my husband. It was only 10 p.m. He should still be awake. Despite repeated calls, he didn't answer. Perhaps he already turned in. Well, I'd be back tomorrow, so it wasn't a pressing concern. Yet an uneasy feeling gnawed at me. Was it women's intuition? Something felt off. From then on, my husband started arriving home unusually late on weekdays, often inebriated. "Hey, I'm home," he slurred one night, collapsing onto the living room floor. "Are you okay?" I asked, concern creeping into my voice. "Shut up, I'm home. Show some respect," he retorted, his words clouded by alcohol. As I tidied up his discarded clothes, he muttered something about Alyssa. You know, if you were as young as Alyssa. Confusion gripped me. Who was Alyssa? What did he mean by his words? Before I could inquire further, he was already asleep. Could he be cheating on me? The unease I felt that day morphed into a creeping certainty. But no, my husband was a good man. It must be drunken nonsense. Yet doubts lingered, unsettling my thoughts. I tried to reassure myself, but my husband's erratic behavior gnawed at me. Weekends meant early departures and late returns, often accompanied by the stench of alcohol. It had become a pattern I could no longer ignore. "You're going out drinking almost every day lately. Are we okay?" I ventured one evening. "Mind your own business. It's my money," he snapped back, dismissive of my concern. "But we need to save for our future," I insisted. His response cut deep. "Well, I've spent quite a bit on treatments." "That's because you're defective." Even in his inebriated state, his words stung. I could have fathomed he'd speak to me that way. As time passed, his disparaging remarks grew more frequent. "Since you can't have kids, you should focus on showing affection to me," he'd say. With each selfish act, my love for him waned. Gone was the caring husband who once supported me through treatments. Would he ever return? After 20 years, I began questioning the essence of our marriage. But before I could confront him about it, he dropped a bombshell. "We need to talk," he said, his demeanor serious. I returned from work to find him on the sofa, his expression grave. "What's wrong? Why are you being so formal?" I asked, sensing something was amiss. "I want a divorce," he declared bluntly. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. "You're joking, right? Why would you say that all of a sudden?" I pleaded, hoping for reassurance. But the idea of divorce had never crossed his mind before. "Yes," he confirmed, leaving me stunned and bewildered. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Divorce? Had my husband been considering it all along? I confronted him, desperate for clarity. "Out of the blue, you want a divorce? What's going on?" I demanded, my emotions raw. "We've been together for 20 years, haven't we? Let's talk this through," I urged, hoping for understanding. But he met my plea with contempt. "You're clueless, aren't you?" he scoffed, his tone laced with bitterness. Confusion clouded my mind. "What do you mean? For 20 years, I've wanted children, but because of you, I've been denied that chance," he accused, his words cutting deep. His revelation blindsided me. "That's not fair. We decided together to stop treatments," I countered, feeling the weight of sadness and frustration. "I was never okay with that. I've always wanted a child," he confessed, his voice heavy with regret. Tears threatened to spill as the reality sank in. "Well, if you sign the divorce papers, I won't have anything else to say," he declared proudly, pushing the papers toward me. But his next words struck like lightning. "I've already decided to remarry." "Remarry? With a 20-year-old? I gasped, disbelief coursing through me. "That's right. Alyssa," he confirmed, a smug satisfaction in his tone. Alyssa, the name echoed in my mind, the same name he had mentioned before. Woman's intuition, it seemed, was not to be underestimated. I felt a flicker of self-satisfaction, but I knew it wasn't the time for indulgence. Then my husband showed me a picture of his so-called adorable Alyssa. As I examined it closely, I struggled to contain my laughter. Surely, this had to be a joke. How could something like this be real? I prayed he didn't notice my odd reaction and swiftly composed myself. "So, you really want a child that badly?" I questioned, masking my incredulity. "Yes, because you can't give birth. There's nothing we can do about that, right? You'll agree to the divorce, won't you?" he pressed, oblivious to my internal turmoil. "I suppose there's no choice," I replied, feigning distress, though secretly his sheer idiocy made the decision easier. With each passing moment, the thought of divorcing him grew more appealing. It felt like divine intervention guiding me toward the right path. With a heavy heart, or so I pretended, I signed the divorce papers and left him behind. I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Surely he would regret his actions soon enough. Time would tell. Fast forward a year after the divorce, and I encountered him on my way home from work. His appearance shocked me. "Lisa, please help me," he pleaded, his shabby appearance a stark contrast to the man I once knew. "Excuse me, who are you?" I asked, genuinely not recognizing him. "It's me, Lisa. I need your help," he insisted, desperation evident in his voice. I hesitated, taken aback by his transformation. "Long time no see," I finally managed, unsure of how to react. In that moment, I realized the tables had turned. It was now his turn to seek assistance, and I held all the cards. "Please introduce me to your company's lawyer," he implored, his request a humbling reminder of his downfall. I couldn't just agree to help out of the blue. It seemed my ex-husband was facing financial troubles. I had sensed it from his appearance, but I never imagined he would change so drastically within a year. "If it's your first consultation, it's free. But to hire them, you'll have to pay their fee," I explained, trying to navigate the situation. "I don't have that kind of money. Please help me," he pleaded, desperation evident in his voice. Perplexed by his sudden predicament, I decided to hear him out. We found ourselves in a nearby cafe where he began to share his story. "Well, actually," he started, but before he could finish, I interjected. "Did that girl Alyssa run off?" I asked, a sudden realization dawning on me. "How did you know?" he responded, surprise evident in his voice. Just as I suspected. When you showed me a picture of a girl named Alyssa, it clicked. She looked exactly like the one who killed a classmate's son at a reunion, I explained, recalling the warning given by the classmate about a woman named Sally, approximately 22 years old. Her age and name are probably fake, of course. The swindler wouldn't use her real name, I added, connecting the dots. Of course you knew about Alyssa, didn't you? He questioned, realization settling in. Well, I guess you could say I knew. But what happened? I inquired, eager to unravel the full story. When I pressed my husband for an explanation, this was the story he offered. About a year ago, he met a woman named Alyssa at a nightclub. My husband, who had always harbored a desire for children, seemed to have shared his thoughts with her. It was during one of these conversations that Alyssa made an astonishing offer. She could bear a child for him. Their relationship blossomed from there. He started frequenting the club almost every weekday and spent weekends with Alyssa outside its confines. In the process, he depleted $10,000 from his savings, accumulated during his single days. Despite this, Alyssa never demanded lavish gifts or expensive outings. She was content just to share a drink with him at the club. She was different, he insisted. Not like the stereotypical club girls you often hear about. She didn't care about designer goods or jewelry. She was happy as long as I was there with her. He painted Alyssa as hardworking and sincere, emphasizing their agreement not to touch each other's savings from their single days. I thought it was his money and he could use it as he pleased, I admitted, unaware of his extravagant spending. Then my husband revealed the twist in the tale. Alyssa's true colors had emerged. I want to get married, but I had debts totaling about $20,000. Then my husband promised to take on Alyssa's debt and transferred the money to her, I recounted, my voice heavy with regret. They moved in together right after our divorce, but Alyssa continued her nighttime work and rarely came home. Eventually, she quit her job at the club and disappeared, taking all the money with her. How could he be so foolish? I lamented, feeling a sense of despair at having been married to such a man for 20 years. Did you make a promissory note? I inquired, hoping for some semblance of responsibility. A what? My husband looked puzzled. You lent her money, didn't you? Didn't you get a note? I pressed, frustration creeping into my tone. We were going to be a couple, so I didn't do such a thing, he admitted. So, you basically gave her the money, is that it? I asked incredulously. In this case, it seems like you donated $20,000 to Alyssa out of goodwill, I concluded, my disappointment palpable. This woman must be a pro, I mused, realizing the extent of her deception. In the case of donations, if the amount exceeds $11,000 in a year, gift tax is imposed. Depending on the case, the receiver might be taxed. So, Alyssa just took $20,000 in cash and vanished, splitting the money into two parts across 2 different years to avoid taxes. The reason my husband thought she was a good girl who never asked for material gifts was because she knew the law well. So, what should I do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. I don't know. Maybe consult a lawyer. It'll cost you, though, he replied, his shoulders slumping in defeat. All my savings from my single days are gone, and the woman I loved ran away from me. I can't go back on my word to the company about remarrying after boasting about getting a younger wife. Isn't that his own doing? I thought, feeling the weight of my husband's pitiful situation. Lisa, it's my fault. Please come back to me, he pleaded. I realized after you were gone, you were the only one who cared about me. I don't need kids anymore. I'll let you do as you like. You must have been lonely too, right? But his misunderstanding persisted. That matter had ended half a year ago in my mind, so I confronted him with reality. You know, it's been a year. What's with this sudden change of heart? Isn't it a little too late now? Lisa, are you going to abandon me? Well, it was you who pushed for our divorce in the first place, remember? I reminded him. You're the only one I can rely on. My ex-husband looked utterly exhausted, and I decided to show him a little mercy. All right then, shall I call up a lawyer friend of mine? Lisa, thank you. I knew I could count on you, he said, tears welling up in his eyes. Mr. Johnson, the lawyer for my company, arrived at the coffee shop. John, over here, I called out, and my ex-husband seemed somewhat perplexed by our overly familiar demeanor. You see, we've been dating for the past 6 months now, I explained. What was it you needed advice on? As I finished speaking, my ex-husband looked as if he was in a daze. No, well, I think that'll be it for today, he muttered. suddenly snapping back to reality and hurriedly leaving the coffee shop. In the end, he couldn't afford to hire a lawyer and resigned himself to his fate. Rumor had it that his company was abuzz with talk of his unfortunate situation, left by his soon-to-be wife and ignored by his ex-wife. As Mr. Johnson and I spoke later, I confessed the truth about the charade. "I'm sorry for involving you in all this, I apologize." "No worries, Lisa. I'm glad I could be of help," he reassured me. "By the way, do you have any plans after this?" Caught off guard by the unexpected turn of events, I was a little flustered, but a fresh start in my mid-40s didn't seem like such a bad beginning. "Yes, I'd love to," I agreed, certain that a fun-filled future was awaiting me. I couldn't shake off this feeling of excitement. "You're pitiful, just a dropout kid from the lowest rung. I bet you were raised in poverty and your kid is living at the bottom of society." "I understand your perspective. Let me introduce myself. I'm Mary. My life has been a roller coaster, to say the least. When I was about to finish middle school, tragedy struck. I lost both my parents in a short span of time. Coping with such loss, my focus shattered, and I couldn't muster the will to study for exams anymore. Predictably, I failed all my high school entrance exams, even the backups. At 15, I found myself at a crossroads, gap year or workforce. To be honest, I did have aspirations of attending high school, but the family members who took me in were financially strained. Moreover, I felt compelled to preserve my parents' life insurance payout for future needs. Add to that the discomfort of entering high school a year late, and the decision to start working seemed the most practical. I must have been 19 then, in a relationship with John, a colleague at my workplace who was 27 at the time. "You're involved with someone much older? Are you sure about this? A man pursuing a 19-year-old, can he truly be responsible?" My aunt, a relative, expressed her concern, but youthful and headstrong, I disregarded her advice. "John is wonderful. Sure, there's an age gap, but 8 years isn't uncommon, right? Well, if it were 25 and 33, perhaps, but 19 and 27 is quite a difference." "What's the difference?" "Quit talking down about him." With that sentiment in mind, we tied the knot when I turned 20. A few months later, I discovered I was pregnant. Initially, I was overjoyed, but it was short-lived. When I broke the news to John, his response shattered me. "What? You're planning to keep it? Seriously? No chance. I can't handle having a child with a dropout. Why should I be burdened with raising a kid who'll end up like you? Why would you say such hurtful things? You knew about my dropout status before we got married, didn't you?" "Yeah, I suppose, but no, it won't work out. I mean, having a child with a dropout, the child will turn out odd, right? I don't want to raise a kid like that. I also want more freedom." John's words stung, and soon he began avoiding me both at home and at work, pressing for a divorce. Over time, my feelings for him waned, and I eventually consented to the split. However, my job at the time, within a small company, lacked any provision for maternity or paternity leave, leaving me no option but to resign concurrently with the divorce. With the support of my relatives and what remained of my parents' life insurance, I safely delivered my son Jacob, pouring all my love into raising him. Despite the financial strain, I remained healthy after childbirth, juggling multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. By the time Jacob entered elementary school, I secured a full-time position, granting both financial stability and emotional bandwidth. Now, 2 decades have elapsed since those trying times. These days, Jacob and I even indulge in leisurely outings together. "Hey, are you perhaps married?" Suddenly, a familiar voice pierced through the air, a voice I had hoped to erase from memory. It belonged to John, my ex-husband, the man who deserted me during my pregnancy 2 decades ago. "I thought it might be you, Mary. So, what brings you to a department store on your day off? Seems a bit upscale for you," John remarked, a smirk playing on his lips. Jacob, likely bewildered by the unexpected encounter, stood quietly, his expression troubled. "I figured he might be your new beau, but he looks rather young, doesn't he? Ah, is this the kid from all those years ago?" "Ah, it's a boy. Well, it's none of my concern anyway," John continued. "Indeed, you and I have long parted ways, John. Why are you even speaking to me?" "Don't be so bitter, Mary. Remember, we used to be deeply in love. Seems like you've turned into quite the cold-hearted woman, haven't you?" John's grin held a hint of mockery, as if the past held no significance to him. Then he uttered something utterly audacious. By the way, is he also a dropout? What? What are you implying? I retorted, taken aback by his insensitivity. Well, I mean, like mother, like son, right? If you dropped out, it's only logical that he would too, isn't it? John's words dripped with disdain. Enough. Stop with your hurtful comments, I snapped, unable to tolerate his callousness any longer. Ah, but he's got my genes, so he must have at least graduated high school, right? Although, in today's world, even with a diploma, you're still scraping the bottom of the barrel, John boasted, dropping the name of a renowned multinational corporation, the kind often plastered across TV screens. Surely, you've heard of this company, Mary? I'm a department head in a major corporation now. I guess you could say I'm part of the elite, he declared. And what would the elite want with someone like me? Are you daft? Do you honestly think I have any interest in someone as ignorant and destitute as you? I only spoke to you out of nostalgia. Frankly, you're nothing but a bother, I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Don't say that, John protested weakly. That's why you'll never achieve anything significant. Ever since you entered my life, my fortunes have changed for the better. I was recruited by a prestigious corporation, and my career has been skyrocketing ever since. Life is certainly smoother without someone like you bringing bad luck. So, I'm a bad omen to you, John. If that's the case, perhaps it's best if you refrain from contacting me altogether. No, sometimes I just like to glance at the bottom of the barrel to remind myself of how fortunate I am. You see, in my workplace, there's no one quite like you, not even among the lowest-ranked employees. But it's true what they say about poverty. It's like a vortex, pulling you down no matter what. Is that all you wanted to say? We're pressed for time, I interjected, urging John to get to the point. Just a moment, let me have a word with my son, John replied casually, placing a hand on Jacob's shoulder with a self-satisfied grin. Then, with a smile still lingering on his face, he addressed Jacob. Life may be tough for you too, but it is what it is. Blame your mother for her poverty and lack of education. If you're looking for someone to resent, point it towards her for having you straight out of middle school. John's expression radiated satisfaction as he glanced around. John, what's taking so long? The restroom was crowded, I inquired, wondering why he was lingering. Oh, I just bumped into someone from the past, John replied casually, as if nothing significant had occurred. At that moment, his wife or girlfriend joined him, a striking woman who seemed intimately connected to John. Can you believe it? This woman dropped out of high school midway through. Not even a high school graduate, but a middle school dropout. Can you imagine? John boasted, his tone dripping with condescension. And her son is likely to follow suit, destined for the bottom rung of society. Aren't you glad you didn't have to endure such a dismal existence? You're fortunate to have landed a high achiever like me, he continued, oblivious to our presence as if we were invisible. However, the woman seemed to take notice of Jacob when he lifted his head. Peering up from her books, her expression turned startled. She pointed at him, her hand trembling uncontrollably. Isn't he? What's the matter? I asked, perplexed by her sudden reaction. Isn't that the president of one of our major clients? She exclaimed. Startled by her outburst, John pivoted around. The moment his gaze landed on Jacob's face, his eyes widened in recognition. Seeing this reaction, Jacob slowly spoke up. I heard your company's name earlier, but upon seeing your face, I suspected it might be you. Indeed, you are the one. Thank you for your hospitality at that dinner the other day. Oh, that. Mr. Jacob, you seemed quite reserved during our dinner. It's quite surprising to witness you publicly criticizing others, labeling them as low-life and uneducated at your whim. Quite impolite of you, isn't it? The woman Lily remarked with a touch of reproach. No, that's... Lily, why didn't you inform me? John interjected, his tone tinged with frustration. I couldn't get a good look at him. Plus, I work in a different department. I can't possibly remember all the clients' faces, Lily defended herself, her voice tinged with apprehension. Useless. What did you just say? John snapped, the tension between him and Lily escalating rapidly. However, Jacob remained unfazed by their argument and spoke up calmly. Well, I'm not particularly interested in your quarrel. I now have a clearer understanding of the director's usual approach. We were in talks about implementing our system in your company, but let's abandon that idea. No, please wait, this is all just a misunderstanding, Jacob interjected, his voice tinged with urgency. Misunderstanding? How is it a misunderstanding when you publicly insulted me? John retorted, his tone laced with indignation. Well, you see, Jacob faltered, struggling to find the right words to explain himself. Mary, this is your fault, John interjected suddenly, redirecting the blame. What? How is this my fault? Mary questioned, bewildered by John's accusation. Because, why on earth would someone like you, a high school dropout, be with Mr. Jacob? Do you even realize who he is? He founded a business while still in college and holds numerous patents. The system he developed is so advanced that major companies are vying to adopt it, John explained, his voice dripping with condescension. Is that so? And why are you with him when you didn't even know that? Mary countered, her tone tinged with skepticism. I'm not quite sure. I don't typically discuss work matters with my son, John replied, he said. Your son? Mary echoed, her tone reflecting surprise. Yes, that's correct. Pleased to make your acquaintance. I am Jacob, the prodigy, son of the high school dropout. Jacob interjected confidently. Well, that's, John stammered, caught off guard by Jacob's assertion. It seems you have something on your mind regarding my mother. Please feel free to express yourself. We likely won't have another chance to converse, Jacob encouraged, his tone composed. Oh, well, what's the situation here? How come someone like you? Why is someone like Jacob's mother, a high school dropout? John stumbled over his words, struggling to articulate his thoughts. John faltered, taken aback by Jacob's unexpected interjection. He appeared torn, as if he wanted to retort but found himself at a loss for words. His gaze shifted uneasily between Mary and Jacob. From my earliest memories, my mother instilled in me a wealth of knowledge. Despite her lack of formal education beyond middle school, she delved into countless books and shared their wisdom with me. Jacob continued, his voice steady and composed. What? I never knew Mary possessed such depth, John muttered, visibly surprised. But there was one subject my mother remained silent on, the criticisms of my father, who abandoned us during her pregnancy. I've harbored resentment towards my father for as long as I can remember, but my mother always insisted it was her own naivety that led to our struggles. Even in our most dire circumstances, when we had nothing and were barely scraping by, she maintained a radiant smile. She's the person I admire most, Jacob recounted, his voice tinged with reverence. So you hold her in high regard, but Mr. Jacob, you share my bloodline, don't you? Can't you consider signing a contract with my company? John pressed, his tone pleading. Yes, I could. However, what's truly unacceptable here is your behavior. We're in a public setting, you know. Have you not considered the embarrassment you're causing? Jacob countered, his tone firm. Well, that's just my honest opinion. I simply perceive Mary as lacking in intelligence, that's all, John retorted, his tone unapologetic. And what does that make you, the man who fathered a child with this woman you call stupid? What kind of person does that make you, abandoning her when she was so young? Maybe she was innocent, but do you have any idea of the hardships she endured? You seem proud of your position in a big company, but why didn't you contribute even a single cent in child support? Jacob's accusations hung heavy in the air, leaving John speechless. As Jacob's words sank in, Lily's expression transformed. From a troubled look, her face now bore a glare directed squarely at John. Wait a minute, that's not what you told me. No, you just be quiet. That can't be true. Didn't you share with me that your previous wife cheated on you and left, that she denied you access to your child, and even refused your attempts to provide child support, forcing you to save instead? Was that entire story just a fabrication? Lily's voice was edged with disbelief and accusation. It seems highly likely that it was a fabrication. My mother and I still reside with our relatives. He knows where we are if he truly intended to provide child support. Mom, has this man ever attempted to contact you? Jacob inquired. Not once. Not on my cell phone. Not at any relative's house. And certainly, there's been no mention of child support, Mary confirmed, her tone tinged with disappointment. My revelation seemed to ignite fury in Lily, while John's complexion drained of color. You lied. You're despicable. I'm relieved I didn't marry you. It's over between us, Lily declared, her voice trembling with anger. What? Wait, Lily, please don't go, John pleaded, desperation evident in his tone. John hastily pursued Lily, leaving Jacob and me to exchange a knowing glance before erupting into laughter. John's pitiful demeanor was simply too amusing to ignore. Afterward, we indulged in some window shopping, feeling thoroughly content as we headed home. Later, Jacob filled me in on the situation. His company and John's were on the verge of sealing a significant contract, but Jacob opted to pull out at the 11th hour. Apparently, he was entirely transparent about his reasons. Your representative was my father, the man who abandoned my pregnant mother and neglected to provide child support. It's inconceivable to trust such an individual and engage in business with him. The system I've developed is akin to my own offspring, entrusting it to him. Just the thought makes my skin crawl. Predictably, this turn of events stirred up considerable turmoil. Allegedly, the company penalized John by demoting him and sidelining his role. It appears they're hoping to coax Jacob into reconsidering the contracts by making an example of John. From Jacob's perspective, it seems he might entertain the idea if they slash John's bonus. Undoubtedly, John is about to face some challenging times, but perhaps it's what he deserves, isn't it? At 48, he only has to weather another 12 years until retirement. My mom endured much harsher circumstances for far longer. When you put it into perspective, this isn't all that tough. Jacob's expression was one of genuine anger as he voiced these sentiments. I empathize with his emotions, so I have no intention of intervening. In his desperation, John has sought refuge at our relative's home. With a deep bow at the entrance, he pleads desperately. I'm deeply sorry for what I did in the past. I lied about providing child support, but I do have savings now. I'm willing to offer Jacob the equivalent of child support as a gift while I'm alive. I'll even compensate Mary if necessary. Please reconsider, John implored. However, Jacob refused to entertain such propositions. Turning to John, he stated firmly, I have no interest in your savings now. Our hardships belong to the past. You didn't support us then, and now you only seek to save yourself. That's unacceptable. I apologize. I was young and foolish. Please forgive me, John pleaded, his voice tinged with remorse. Those who genuinely regret their actions wouldn't dangle compensation as a bargaining chip. Your selfishness knows no bounds. Please leave. If you return to this house, I won't hesitate to involve the authorities. Wouldn't that further jeopardize your position at the company? Jacob's words struck a chord, prompting John to flee in a panicked frenzy. Thanks to Jacob's intervention, it's unlikely John will darken our doorstep again. We can look forward to peaceful days ahead. Currently, Jacob is focused on completing all his college credits. But once that's accomplished, he plans to treat the entire family to a trip to a hot springs resort. Despite my protests, Jacob insists on repaying our support. If that's his wish, we'll gratefully accept his generosity. Surely, we'll enjoy